I still remember the day he moved in. A quiet morning, the sky soft with spring light, and the sound of an unfamiliar car stopping in front of our old gate. I was hanging freshly washed bedsheets on the line when I saw him step out, tall, polite, with a smile that seemed rehearsed. He said his name was Ethan, and he was the new tenant for the upstairs unit my landlord had just listed a week ago. At first glance, nothing about him seemed unusual. He carried only two medium-sized bags, no furniture, no boxes, like someone traveling light or running from something he didn't want to carry anymore. When he greeted me, his voice was calm, warm even, and he offered to help me with the laundry, which I politely refused. Still, there was something strange in the way he looked at me. Not like a stranger seeing a stranger, but like someone who already knew me. My landlord, Mr. Harris, was in his late 60s and rarely around. He lived abroad most of the time, managing his properties through an agent. I'd been renting the ground floor for nearly 3 years, and except for the occasional phone call about repairs, I'd barely heard from him. So when he suddenly decided to rent out the upper floor again after almost 2 years of keeping it empty, I didn't think much of it. Ethan's presence was refreshing at first. He seemed quiet, respectful, always offering a smile when our paths crossed. The first few days, he kept mostly to himself. I would hear faint footsteps upstairs late at night, sometimes the sound of a chair moving or music playing softly, nothing disruptive, just traces of life. But one evening, while I was coming home from work, I noticed something unusual. The gate was slightly open. I always made sure to lock it behind me. When I walked in, I found Ethan sitting on the front porch steps, staring at the old garden fountain that hadn't worked in years. "You're home early," he said with that same easy tone. I smiled, told him I'd had a light day at the office. But as I passed him, I saw it. He was holding an old photograph in his hand. A black and white picture of this very house, years before I ever lived here. "Where did you get that?" I asked, more curious than alarmed. He looked startled for a moment, then slipped it into his pocket. "Oh, I found it in one of the drawers upstairs. Must have belonged to a previous tenant." Something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. His voice was calm, but his eyes, they avoided mine. I didn't push further. I didn't want to seem nosy. Still, that night, as I sat at my kitchen table, I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph. The next few weeks, little things began to catch my attention. Once, when I went to throw away trash, I noticed Ethan's mail in the box, but instead of his name, the envelope read to Mr. Harris. It was addressed to the same man who owned the house, our landlord. When I mentioned it casually to Ethan, he just laughed. "Oh, that's weird. Maybe the postman mixed it up. I'll let the owner know." It should have ended there, but it didn't. Over time, Ethan started getting more involved in my life. It wasn't intrusive, not at first. He'd offer to carry groceries, fix a loose doorknob, or bring over coffee when he brewed too much. I lived alone, so the company felt nice. There was something comforting about having another heartbeat in the house. But sometimes, he said things that didn't make sense, like when he knew I worked in marketing before I'd ever told him, or when he mentioned details about my rent payments that only the landlord could know. One night, I asked him directly, half jokingly, "You sure you're not secretly Mr. Harris in disguise, checking if I'm taking care of the place?" He laughed a little too hard, then he said, "Would you be mad if I was?" The way he said it wasn't teasing, it felt almost serious. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint footsteps upstairs, packing back and forth, stopping near the balcony above my bedroom. At one point, I thought I heard him whisper something, a name maybe, but I couldn't make it out. A few days later, while he was out, curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the staircase and stood at his door. I shouldn't have done it, I know, but something about him just didn't add up. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was neat, almost too neat. A few books, a single coffee mug, and his two bags by the bed still unpacked. On the desk, there was a framed photo. It was of Ethan standing beside Mr. Harris. My heart sank. The resemblance was clear now, the same sharp jawline, the same deep-set eyes. How did I not notice it before? The tenant was a tenant at all. He was Mr. Harris's son. I left the room quietly, my pulse racing. But what was he doing here? Why pretend to be someone else? Why lie to me? I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I watched. For days, I paid attention to every little thing, the calls he took outside, the way he avoided mentioning his past, and how he always seemed to know when the landlord would call. It was as if he was testing me, watching me. Then came the night that changed everything. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that makes the streets blur and the world feel smaller. I was sitting by my window when I saw Ethan outside, standing under the downpour, talking to someone on the phone. His voice was sharp, unlike the calm tone I'd gotten used to. "I can't tell her yet," he said, "not until I know the truth." The words froze me. Who was he talking about? Me? He turned suddenly as if sensing someone watching. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass. He ended the call abruptly and disappeared into his room. That night, I couldn't resist. I knocked on his door. He opened it, drenched hair sticking to his forehead, eyes unreadable. "Ethan," I said softly, "who are you really?" He didn't answer at first. He looked down, then stepped aside, motioning me in. Inside, the lights were dim. The framed photo I'd seen earlier was gone. In its place lay an envelope with my name on it. "I was going to tell you," he said finally, "but not like this." My throat went dry. "Tell me what?" He hesitated, then said, "That I'm not here by accident." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the whole house was listening. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but he spoke again, slower this time. "My father, Mr. Harris, he's been sick, very sick. He asked me to come here and see something for myself. He said there were things in this house that didn't make sense, people he couldn't trust." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "You mean me?" He shook his head quickly. "No, not you, but someone close to you, someone who's been taking advantage of him." I frowned. "What are you talking about? I barely even talk to anyone except you." He looked away. "Exactly." I didn't understand then, but I saw it in his eyes, fear, guilt, and something else I couldn't name. "I shouldn't have lied," he whispered, "but my father, he thought you might be hiding something, that you knew why the upper floor was empty all those years." My chest tightened. "Empty, because he told me it was under renovation." He nodded slowly. "That's what he told everyone, but someone used to live up here, my mother." The air seemed to vanish. I couldn't speak. "She lived here before she disappeared," he said quietly, "and this was her last known address." My legs felt weak. "Disappeared." He nodded again. 20 years ago." The words echoed in my mind. I'd never heard of any woman living here before. Mr. Harris had always mentioned owning the house for decades, but never once spoke about a family. "I didn't come here as a tenant," Ethan said. "I came here to find out what happened to her." My pulse raced. "And you think I know?" "I don't know," he said, voice trembling, "but there's something in this house, something my father never told anyone." I stared at him, torn between fear and pity. He looked so broken, so desperate to believe there was an answer waiting here. "Then why pretend?" I asked softly. "Why not just tell me from the start?" "Because I didn't know who I could trust," he said. "My father thinks you were close to the previous caretaker, the one who disappeared around the same time as my mother." I froze. My heart started pounding. He was talking about Grace, the woman who used to live in this house before I moved in, the one everyone said left suddenly one night. "She was my aunt," I whispered. Ethan's eyes widened. "Your aunt?" "Yes," I said, barely breathing. "She raised me after my parents died, but she never told me she worked for the Harrises." He took a step closer, his expression shifting from shock to realization. "Then you might be the only one who can help me." My hands trembled. "Help you with what?" "To find out what really happened," he said, "to her and to my mother." The rain outside grew louder, like it was trying to drown out his words. The world around me blurred. I didn't know what to think anymore. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. I sat by the window, replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment that now felt like part of a lie. My mind spiraled through questions I couldn't answer. Why would Mr. Harris suspect me? Why did Ethan hide his identity? And most of all, what had really happened in this house 20 years ago? The next morning, when I went upstairs, Ethan was gone. His room was empty, no bags, no clothes, nothing. Only one thing remained, the old black and white photograph lying on the desk again with a new note beside it. It said, "Look behind the wall in the storage room, you'll understand everything." My breath caught. The storage room. The one Grace had always kept locked. I felt my fingers tremble as I reached for the spare key I'd never dared to use before. My heart was beating so fast I could barely think. As I opened the door, a wave of cold air swept over me. Dust hung thick in the air, the scent of old paint and forgotten years. I took a few hesitant steps inside and turned toward the far wall. Something about it looked uneven, like a section had been plastered over. And then I saw it, barely visible under a layer of peeling paint, scratched words that sent shivers down my spine. It was a name. His mother's name. And below it, written faintly in smaller letters, "Help me." My knees went weak. I stumbled back, breath shaking, eyes wide in disbelief. Because in that moment I realized whatever happened in this house wasn't over yet. And Ethan's disappearance might not have been a coincidence. I couldn't move. The words on that wall, faint, cracked, desperate, burned themselves into my mind. "Help me." The paint had faded, but those two words still screamed louder than anything I'd ever read. The air in that room felt heavy, almost suffocating, as though it was still holding the breath of whoever had written them. For the first time since I'd moved into that house, I felt afraid of it. Not uneasy, truly afraid. I stepped closer, running my fingertips over the rough surface. The wall was cold. Beneath the layer of plaster, it sounded hollow when I tapped. My heart was pounding now. I looked around for something, anything I could use. In the corner, I found a small hammer left behind by the previous maintenance worker. My hands shook as I lifted it and struck lightly against the spot where the letters were. The sound echoed through the room, sharp, hollow, wrong. Pieces of old plaster broke away, falling to the floor like fragile bones. Dust filled the air, coating my skin. I hit it again, harder this time. A crack split down the wall. Beneath the old paint, I saw a glimpse of wood and old panel. I dropped the hammer and pried it open with my fingers. Behind it, there was a narrow cavity just wide enough to hide something, and there, wedged between two beams, was a small, decaying box. I pulled it out. The metal hinges were rusted, the surface covered in grime. For a second I just stared at it, terrified of what I might find inside. When I finally opened it, the smell of old paper hit me. Inside were a few letters bound with a piece of faded blue ribbon. The top one was addressed to Mr. Harris, but the handwriting, it wasn't his wife, it was Grace's, my aunt. My eyes blurred with tears as I unfolded the first letter. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. "If you ever find this, I want you to know that I tried. I tried to protect her, but I couldn't. She trusted the wrong man, and now everything's gone too far. Please forgive me." The letter ended abruptly without a signature. My hands went cold. I looked through the rest of the box. There were more letters, most of them half-burnt, torn, or unreadable, but one stood out. It was newer. The handwriting was Grace. "He'll come back one day, and when he does, tell him the truth, even if it breaks him." It was signed M.H. My chest tightened. M.H., that could only mean Mrs. Harris, Ethan's mother, the woman who'd vanished 20 years ago. I sat on the dusty floor, staring at the letters, feeling like the walls were closing in. The story I thought I knew about a kind landlord, a quiet house, a peaceful life was gone. Every smile, every moment with Ethan, every strange look now had a different meaning. And then another thought struck me. Ethan had disappeared right after telling me about his mother. What if he'd found this before me? What if that's why he left? I grabbed my phone and called his number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. I sent a text. I found the letters, please call me. But no reply came. For hours, I sat there staring at the hidden wall, waiting for my phone to light up. It never did. The next morning, I went to the local property agent, the one who managed the house when Mr. Harris was abroad. The woman behind the counter looked surprised when I mentioned Ethan's name. "There's no tenant named Ethan in our records," she said flatly. "What do you mean? He moved in 3 weeks ago." She frowned, typing something into her computer. "I have no record of any new tenant upstairs. According to our system, that floor is still vacant." I felt dizzy. "That's impossible. I saw him sign papers." She looked at me sympathetically. "With who?" I paused. "He said he dealt directly with Mr. Harris." The woman shook her head. "Mr. Harris hasn't spoken to anyone directly for months. He's in the hospital overseas." I felt my stomach drop. "Hospital?" She nodded. "Terminal illness. His son been handling his affairs recently, but not here. He hasn't been to this country in years." I stood frozen. My mind refused to accept her words. If Ethan hadn't come from Mr. Harris, then who was he? I left the office and drove back home, the letters heavy in my bag, every thought twisted into darker shapes. Was Ethan lying about everything? Was he even Mr. Harris's son? When I reached the house, something felt off. The gate was wide open again. I stepped inside cautiously. The front door was unlocked. My heart pounded as I entered the living room. Everything looked normal except for one thing. On the dining table there was a single envelope. My name was written on it in Ethan's handwriting. I tore it open with trembling hands. I'm sorry I had to go. I found something I can't explain yet. Don't trust anyone who calls about the letters. Burn them, please. You're not safe there anymore." The note ended there, no signature, no explanation. I stared at it for a long time, numb. My reflection in the window looked like someone else, someone trapped in a story she didn't choose. Later that night, my phone rang. The number was unknown. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice spoke, old, fragile, trembling. "Is this Claire?" It took me a moment to realize it was Mr. Harris. "Yes," I said softly. He coughed, his voice strained. "You need to leave that house." My throat tightened. "Why? What's happening? Where, Ethan?" There was silence, then he whispered, "He's not who you think he is." The line went dead. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint buzz of static. I tried calling back, but it said the number was unreachable. I stood there, shaking, staring at the letters still lying on my table. Something inside me broke then. I couldn't run, not without answers. That night, I went back to the storage room. I needed to see if there was more behind that wall. I took a flashlight and began knocking around the panels, listening for hollow spots. My hand brushed against the floorboard and I heard it, a faint, metallic clink. I knelt down. One of the boards was loose. I pried it open and found a small metal latch underneath. When I pulled it, part of the floor lifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside it, wrapped in a thin cloth, was a tape recorder. My hands were shaking as I pressed the play button. The voice that came through was faint but unmistakable. It was Grace. "If someone finds this, I don't have much time. He knows. He found out about her. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. If she's gone, tell her son the truth. Tell him it wasn't an accident." The tape crackled, then cut off. I froze. It wasn't an accident. Those words echoed in my ears. What wasn't an accident? Who was he? I felt a sudden rush of cold air from behind me. The door to the storage room creaked. I turned quickly, and there he was. "Ethan." Soaking wet, pale, eyes dark as the night outside. "Ethan," I whispered, "where have you been?" He didn't answer. He looked exhausted, almost haunted. Slowly, he stepped closer. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said quietly. "I found the letters," I said, "and the tape. You lied to me." He shook his head. "No, I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." I felt anger and fear twist inside me. "Who are you really, Ethan? Because the real Mr. Harris's son hasn't been here for years." His expression didn't change. Instead, he whispered, "I know." "What do you mean you know?" He took another step closer, his voice breaking, "Because I'm not him." My pulse skipped. "I'm his son," he said, "but not the one you think." My mind couldn't process the words. "That doesn't make any sense." "It does," he said softly. "My name is Ethan Harris. It's Ethan Moore. My mother was married to your landlord before she disappeared. I'm the son she had before him." The world tilted around me. "You're saying you're her child?" He nodded slowly. "Half-brother to his son. I came here because I found her name in his old hospital records listed as deceased under uncertain circumstances. But when I asked him, he refused to talk, so I came here myself." I felt dizzy, almost weightless. Then why pretend to be his son? He sighed. "Because it was the only way to get inside this house. His agent wouldn't let anyone near it otherwise. My mother lived here before she disappeared. This place, it's where she was last seen." I sank into the nearest chair, my head spinning. "So you came here to find the truth?" "Yes," he said, "but now it's worse than I thought." He looked at the wall where the name was written. "That writing, I've seen it before, on a photo my mother left behind." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "So she wrote it." He nodded faintly. "She was begging for help, but from who, I don't know. Maybe from Grace, maybe from him." "Him?" Ethan looked up, his face pale. "Mr. Harris, he wasn't the man everyone thought he was." A chill ran through me. "What are you saying?" He hesitated. "She didn't disappear. She was trying to leave, and someone stopped her." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, I whispered, "And you think your father?" He cut me off. "I don't think I know." The rain outside started again, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. "I found the hospital files," he said quietly. "They said she fell down the stairs, hit her head, but there's no death certificate, no record of burial, nothing, just a note in his handwriting, case closed." My hands trembled. "So what happened to her?" He looked at me, eyes filled with something between grief and rage. I think she's still here. The words hung in the air, cold and final. I followed his gaze toward the old storage room wall. My skin crawled. Still here, I whispered. He nodded. There's something behind that wall, something my father hid before he left. My pulse raced. We need to call the police. He shook his head. Not yet. I need to see for myself first. I need to know. Before I could stop him, he grabbed the hammer from the floor and started breaking through the wall. The sound was deafening. Plaster and dust filled the air. I shouted for him to stop, but he kept going, hitting harder and harder until the wall cracked open, revealing something that made both of us freeze. Behind the wall was a narrow space, a hidden room. Inside it was a small wooden chest, half-rotten with age. Ethan's breath quickened. He dropped the hammer and knelt, opening the chest. Inside, wrapped in a decayed sheet, was a woman's bracelet, engraved with the initials MH. And beneath it, a photo of Grace holding a baby. I stared at it in horror, my heart breaking. Ethan, I whispered, that's my aunt. He looked up at me, eyes wide with disbelief. Then that baby. I couldn't speak, the truth was too heavy, too cruel. It was me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world around us seemed to stop, the air heavy, the walls pressing closer. Ethan's eyes were locked on the photo in his trembling hands, and I could barely breathe. The woman in the picture was unmistakably my aunt, younger, smiling faintly as she held a baby wrapped in a blanket. But that smile, it wasn't the peaceful, kind expression I remembered from my childhood. There was fear hiding behind it. A quiet kind of fear, the kind that doesn't scream but never fades. I looked closer. The baby had a faint birthmark near the right wrist, the same one I had. My voice cracked, that's me. Ethan didn't move, his lips parted but no words came out. His knuckles turned white around the photo as if holding it too tightly might make the truth disappear. I took a step back, my legs shaking. Everything I thought I knew, who I was, where I came from, shattered in that moment. She told me she adopted me, I whispered, that my parents died in an accident. He finally looked up, his expression broken. Claire, I think your aunt wasn't your aunt. The words pierced through me. Then who was she? Ethan's voice trembled. She was my mother. For a few seconds I couldn't even hear. My heartbeat drowned everything else. I stared at him, trying to understand, trying to reject it all at once. That can't be true, I whispered. She couldn't have lied to me all these years. She had to, he said quietly. If my father found out she survived, he would have come for her, for you. I shook my head violently, tears burning my eyes. No, this doesn't make sense. She told me she worked as a caretaker here, yes, but she never mentioned him, never said she had a child. Ethan's gaze softened. She was protecting you. The words broke something inside me. I stumbled back against the wall, sliding to the floor as tears blurred my vision. All the memories, her gentle voice, her careful silences whenever I asked about the past, suddenly fit together like pieces of a terrible puzzle. All this time, I'd been living in my own mother's shadow without knowing it. Ethan crouched beside me, his own eyes glistening. That's why I came here, he said softly. I had to know what really happened to her, and now I think she never left at all. My voice barely came out. What do you mean? He pointed toward the hidden space where we'd found the bracelet and the photo. The police never searched this part of the house. It was sealed before the investigation. My father made sure of it. I stared at the dark hollow behind the wall. The air from inside felt colder, like it had been untouched for decades. Ethan swallowed hard. I think he hid her here after she tried to leave. A sob escaped my throat. You're saying he killed her? He looked away. I don't know, but he lied about everything. The hospital records, the fake death certificate, all of it. I couldn't hold it anymore. I cried silently, the weight of truth crushing my chest. Ethan reached out, hesitated, then gently took my hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. You didn't deserve this. I shook my head, tears still falling. Neither did you. For a long while we just sat there, two broken people connected by a truth too cruel to bear. When the storm outside finally calmed, I wiped my face and stood. We need to call the police, I said firmly. This time they'll have to listen. Ethan nodded. I'll call them, but first, there's one more thing I need to show you. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, an old hospital record yellowed with time. "I found this in the chest too," he said. "It's a report dated a year after she supposedly died." My eyes scanned the faded print. Patient Margaret Harris alias Grace Moore, condition stable, transferred for further care. I looked up trembling. She was alive. He nodded, but there's no record of where she was transferred. The trail ends here. I pressed the paper to my chest. Then maybe she's still out there. He gave me a look that broke my heart, or maybe she was once. We called the police that night. They arrived hours later after we'd already sat through silence that felt endless. They took the letters, the photograph, and the bracelet. They promised to open an official investigation, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe half of what they heard. After they left, the house felt emptier than ever. Ethan and I sat in the living room, barely speaking. The air between us was heavy with everything unsaid, the grief, the disbelief, the fragile bond we didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. Sometime past midnight, Ethan stood up. "I have to go," he said quietly. I looked at him, panic flaring in my chest. "Go where?" "I need to talk to him," he said. "My father, I need to hear it from his mouth." My stomach twisted. "He's dying, Ethan. Do you really think he'll tell you the truth?" He looked down. "Maybe not, but I can't let him die without asking." I wanted to stop him, but I knew I couldn't. He needed closure, even if it destroyed him. Before he left, he turned to me one last time. "If anything happens," he said, "promise me you'll leave this house. Don't stay here alone." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He gave me a faint, tired smile, the kind that held both gratitude and goodbye, and walked out into the night. That was the last time I saw him alive. The next morning, I woke to the sound of sirens. My phone rang nonstop. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end was shaking. "Miss Claire, this is Detective Monroe. You need to come down to the station. It's about Ethan Moore." My heart stopped. What happened? There was a long pause. He didn't make it. The world tilted again. My knees gave out and the phone slipped from my hand. They said he'd been in a car crash, no foul play, no witnesses, instant death. But I didn't believe it. Not when I remembered his last words. Not when I found the voicemail he'd left an hour before the crash, a message that only played halfway before cutting out. He told me everything. I was right. Don't stay in the house. Static, then silence. The police ruled it an accident. I called Mr. Harris's number over and over again. It never connected. A week later, I received a letter from a law firm. Mr. Harris had passed away, leaving the property to me. I never asked for it. I never wanted it. But somehow, it felt like the final act of a man who knew he couldn't outrun his sins. Now I live surrounded by walls that whisper. I still hear footsteps upstairs, sometimes soft, deliberate, familiar. Sometimes I wake in the night to the faint sound of a woman humming, the same tune my aunt used to sing to me as a child. I tell myself it's the wind, the creak of old wood. But some nights when I see my reflection in the dark window, I think I see her standing behind me, smiling sadly. The way she did in that photo. And sometimes I think I hear Ethan's voice too. Not angry, not scared, just saying the same thing he said before he left. "You're not alone anymore." The police eventually closed the case. They said there wasn't enough evidence to reopen it. But deep down, I know the truth still sleeps beneath these floors, hidden in the walls that once kept her prisoner. I kept one thing from the evidence box, her bracelet. I wear it now, every day, the way she once did. It feels like carrying a heartbeat that refuses to fade. And every morning, when sunlight hits the window and warms the old wood, I whisper a promise into the quiet house. "I'll tell your story, Mom, both of yours. Because the truth didn't die with them. It lives here in the echoes, the silence, and the house that once hid everything. The house that finally gave back what it took. When I opened my eyes, everything felt like a blur. The faint smell of antiseptic filled the air and bright white lights hurt my eyes. I tried to move, but my arm was connected to a drip. My throat was dry and my head felt heavy. A nurse noticed I was awake and quickly called someone. Moments later, Daniel rushed in, his face pale, his eyes red like he hadn't slept for days. He ran to my side, holding my hand tightly. "You scared me, Mia," he whispered, voice trembling. I blinked, confused. "What happened?" I asked weakly, his eyes lowered. You fainted after the fire alarm. You've been unconscious for 2 days. My heart sank. 2 days, the memories came flooding back, the fire, the screams, the sight of my landlord's furious face. I looked around frantically. My apartment. It's gone, Daniel said softly. Half the building burned before they put it out. Tears welled in my eyes, everything I owned, every piece of my small life gone. I turned away, silent sobs shaking my chest. Daniel squeezed my hand, whispering, "You're safe now, that's all that matters." After a long pause, I looked at him. "Why did you save me? You could have left." He looked almost offended. "Mia, how could I? I couldn't lose you like that." Something about the way he said it felt deeper than concern, like there was something more behind those words. When I was discharged 2 days later, Daniel insisted I stay with him temporarily. I didn't want to, but I had nowhere else to go. Everything I owned was ash. He said he'd already spoken to the insurance company. Apparently, the landlord was under investigation because of the fire. I hesitated. Why would the landlord be under investigation? I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Because the fire didn't start naturally, it was set deliberately. Someone tampered with the wiring. The words froze me. You mean someone tried to burn me alive? He looked away. Maybe not you specifically, but yes, someone did. The tension between us grew as days passed. Living under the same roof, I noticed things I hadn't before. Daniel was gentle, caring, always watching over me, but sometimes his eyes carried a strange sadness, like guilt. One night, while he was out buying groceries, I noticed a drawer in his room slightly open. Curiosity got the better of me. I went closer and saw a stack of old photos. My heart stopped. The man in the photos was my landlord, but beside him stood a younger version of Daniel, smiling, standing proudly with his arm around his father. My hands trembled as I picked one up. The back had a date from 8 years ago and a note written in the landlord's handwriting, my son Daniel's graduation day. My breath caught. No, this couldn't be my landlord's son. The front door opened. I froze. Daniel's footsteps approached. I quickly shoved the photo back and shut the drawer, pretending nothing happened, but my heart was pounding so loud I thought he could hear it. He entered, smiling faintly. "You okay?" he asked. "You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Everything suddenly made sense, the way he appeared out of nowhere, the way the landlord treated him differently, the hidden arguments. He wasn't some stranger who happened to rent next door. He was his son, his disguised son. But why? Why pretend to be a tenant? The next morning I confronted him, my voice shook. "Daniel, who are you really?" He froze mid-step, coffee mug halfway to his lips. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I saw the photos. You're his son, my landlord's son." For a long moment he said nothing. The silence was unbearable. Then he slowly set the mug down and sighed. "I was going to tell you, just not like this." My chest tightened. "So it's true?" He nodded. "Yes, I'm his son, but I didn't lie to hurt you, I swear." "Then why?" I demanded. "Why pretend to be someone else? Why move into the same building under a fake name?" Daniel rubbed his face, looking tortured. "Because my father didn't want me to. He didn't trust tenants anymore after losing money years ago. He asked me to stay there undercover to see if you were reliable before renewing your lease." I felt sick, so I was some kind of test. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said desperately. "I just wanted to understand you. You were kind, honest, independent. I fell for you, Mia. That wasn't part of the plan." My voice broke. "You lied to me every single day." "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I wanted to tell you, but my father, he wouldn't allow it." I turned away, tears streaming. "Your father tried to evict me. He accused me of breaking rules I didn't even know existed, and now he's the reason I have nowhere to live." Daniel's voice trembled. "You don't know everything about him. He's not the man you think he is." I looked at him sharply. "Then tell me, Daniel, tell me who he really is." He hesitated, his lips parted, but before he could speak his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went pale. I have to take this." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. I could still hear his muffled voice, urgent and angry. "No, Dad, I didn't tell her anything. Stop, you're crossing the line." My blood ran cold. When he came back, I pretended I hadn't heard. But that night as he slept on the couch, I sat by the window, staring at the dark city below, trembling from the truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The next day, police came knocking on the door. Daniel answered, confused. "What's going on?" one officer asked. "Are you Daniel Carter, son of Richard Carter?" Daniel stiffened. "Yes." The officer handed him a document. "Your father's been arrested, suspected insurance fraud and attempted arson." My mouth fell open. The officer turned to me. "Ma'am, you're listed as a witness. We'll need your statement." Daniel collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. Oh my God, he actually did it. Everything came crashing down at once: the fake identity, the fire, the lies. And beneath it all, a father willing to burn everything to the ground, even his son's heart. But something in Daniel's face told me it wasn't over. The guilt in his eyes ran deeper than just shock. Because sometimes, the biggest lie isn't the one we're told. It's the one someone tells themselves to survive. And I had a feeling Daniel was still hiding one more truth. Something even darker. Something that could change everything I thought I knew about him, and about what really happened the night the fire started.